So back in episode 108 on that podcast, and again, we'll link this in the show notes. They did an episode with a gentleman by the name of Zach Danks. Is that correct,
Yep.
Rick? Yeah.
Yep.
Who works in Kentucky. I think he's one of their.
He's a state turkey biologist for Kentucky.
Yes. Turkey, and then I want to say there's another game bird.
Is he grouse management still?
I think grouse management. I
Yeah.
think that is correct. So they had him on episode 108, and they eventually get to talking about the cicada hatches. And I can't remember if it was research that he's participating in. He also mentioned someone, I believe, from Tennessee Tech that they were doing some research as far as the cicada hatches. As some of our listeners might know, we had a fairly large one back in like 21 around our area. This year, in 2025, there's another large hatch that is Brood 14, I believe. Is that correct, Rick?
Mm-hmm.
So in that podcast, they talk about Brood 14, which is going to hatch this spring. Now, this is the same brood that hatched in, so it's a 17-year hatch. They hatched in 2008 in Kentucky. So 2 years after the hatch, so you'd have 2-year-old gobblers. In 2010. In 2010, Kentucky had the record harvest year. And Kentucky has never had another harvest that high. These past 2 years were close, but it's still not that record year. So he got to talking about this hatch again. And with some of the preliminary research that's coming out, taking a look at the turkey populations about 2 years post these different hatches, and then how you get this large increase in bird numbers, right? That hatch in 2008, take the year 2010, for example, where you get that record harvest year. There is another interesting way to look at this that I had mentioned to you guys. If you were to, so in
I'm going to
theory,
pull it up.
Yeah, you can pull up the brood map here, Rick. But so for our listeners, in theory, right, the research and probably anecdotal evidence would suggest that 2 years after a hatch of cicadas, you're going to have a fairly healthy population of birds. So if you were, and we know, going back to the habitat stuff, good habitat is going to produce potentially more gobblers and have a healthier population of birds in that area. So knowing those two things, what if you were to go through, let's say you're planning, so right now we're getting a large hatch. It's 2025. So in 2027, you would say there's a boom year of 2-year-old gobblers. Okay, now take that brood map where you know the hatch is going to happen, and then overlay that with public lands, or if you're a private land hunter, so areas that do habitat, some form of habitat management, whether it's like cutting, burning, etc. So overlay those two things, boom, I would say you probably have a very darn good starting point for picking out places to go hunt birds in 2027. Absolutely. I think you could have a banner year.
This is some Jake Bush soil map shit we got going on.
That's what it looks like.
This is awesome.
So yeah, well, hopefully we're able to kind of show this to you guys. We got a brood map up right now, but you can see, so on the lower right-hand side, you have kind of a key code there. So it shows all the different 17-year and 13-year broods. At the very bottom there, you can see there's a darker splotch that says where there's overlap. There's multiple ones in areas, which is interesting. Actually, in Ohio and then in parts of Indiana, there's multiple that overlap.
Let's talk about Arkansas, where Blake Brothers and Austin Crutchfield live. We don't need to talk about Ohio
or the Northeast, where up in the Pennsylvania
or
New
Tennessee.
York area.
Let's talk about Maine up here. and you know what's disgusting to me? Maine would knock people's socks off, and they have 0 cicadas. So
all the turkeys are right
in
there.
case you don't know where Maine is, it's the McDonald's up top there. That's crazy, though.
Yeah, brood at 14, you can see that like bright yellow-green. There's the map there. It covers pretty much almost the entire state of Kentucky. And then it gets into Tennessee as well. a little bit of Ohio, but that is the brood that is getting ready to hatch this spring. That is one to keep an eye on. But there's also one in 2021. So if you figure the one that hatched in 21, 23 was probably that boom year for 2-year-olds. We're only in 25. So I would imagine those areas are still probably going to be good if they have birds living longer, right?
Missouri, Arkansas, Illinois, you should have a hell of a bird year the next couple of years.
You could have some steroid out, like 4-year-old birds, just boss toms out there, especially if you get in those areas with that have the habitat diversity. Those areas are probably going to be pretty dang good for a while.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, but that's something when I was listening to those, I'm like, man, you could really utilize this information and try and plan for years to come and be efficient with it.
And if you're listening right now, you need to head over to the YouTube channel and check this out. Rick pulled this up and was just kind of showing off this map if you didn't catch on to that already.
Yeah, we have the map pulled up. So this could be a tool to utilize as you're planning for the upcoming years, especially in 2027 with this large hatch. I'll be curious to see what the harvest numbers are for like Kentucky and then into parts of Ohio and Tennessee, and see if we get that same kind of increase as they did in like 2010. That would be very interesting.
I want to know why cicadas don't exist all in those other places.
When you have an entomologist on here, maybe they'll be able to tell us that.
I kind of want to, because like all these phenomenal bird states, like breathtaking bird states, don't have cicadas.
If you're listening out there and you are an entomologist, not just a like avid bug collector, but like an actual entomologist, please contact us at we'll put it in the line notes. Put it Christopher Leppert at themobilehuntersexpo.com, Joshua Luck at mobilehuntersexpo.com, Richard Cates at themobilehuntersexpo.com. We would love to have you on to talk about this and how this ultimately happens and why they're so concentrated here versus other areas.
It's like when you look at the Northeast where there's billions of birds, Michigan, freaking Dakotas, Nebraska, like I would assume that it's just a simple, we have giant grasshoppers. I've found grasshoppers that would kill you in Nebraska. So I found one almost as big as my hand, dude. So maybe that's a thing. Maybe those kill cicadas or, whatever, but it'd just be an interesting bit of information to know. Cause they're pretty centralized here.
Yeah. And I think Josh and I discussed this part too, is that when you look at this map and you really think about it and you think of 17-year cicadas. So 17-year cicadas, we're going to have a 2025 hatch this year. Previous one was 2008. What's 17 years minus 2008? It's 1991. A lot of people ask themselves, why turkey populations are so big during the middle of the 90s. Like, it's the good old days of turkey hunting. What was happening in the early 90s with turkeys?
They were reintroducing them there.
We're reintroducing them. So there tends to be a thought in my head, and I've got no scientific means of proving this. If you're a biologist and you'd like to call in or tell us, I'd be happy to have this conversation. But there's cascading effects when you do things in nature. When you introduce a new thing onto the landscape, and they have a grossly large amount of food, they're gonna boom pretty quickly. And you look at turkey numbers from the 80s, from when they started reintroducing in the 70s into Ohio. If you want to go all the way back to episode 3, me and Chris
with your dad.
Talked to my dad who hunted birds in Ohio in the 70s when they first started reintroducing these things. Through the 80s, it was still pretty sparse. And if you talk to a turkey hunter in the Midwest, really, the good old days are like 95 to the mid 2000s. And then that's when populations really start to fall off. And there's, a multitude of factors there, but there becomes this reality that when you're reintroducing something, and it has a massive food source, it's going to boom very quickly, and you're going to hit a peak, and then eventually it'll plateau, and then it'll fall off. So there may be some reality that when you overlay these maps, that's part of the reason why the wild turkey did so well in the Midwest at that time.